Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to our program this evening, The History of Great Island with architect George Knight. George will speak about the architectural design and history of Darien's Great Island buildings, many of which can be traced back to prominent and well-known architectural firms of the era. As many of you know, the property was originally built as a summer estate by William Ziegler, a billionaire industrialist and baking powder magnate who died in 1905. I want to take this time to acknowledge our community partners for this event, the Museum of Darien and the Great Island Advisory Committee. Our sincere thanks for making this program possible. Before we begin, I would like to mention that programs at Darien Library are made possible by the annual Friends of the Library campaign. We thank you for your support to make programs like this possible and our collections available to the community. And now I'd like to introduce Selectman Monica McNally, Chair of the Great Island Advisory Committee, who will talk a little bit more about the program. Welcome, Monica.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to stand in the sun so I don't need the glasses. So tonight, we're going to learn a little bit more about the history of Great Island and the significance of some of its structures from George Knight. George is a highly accomplished architect who runs his own architectural firm in New Haven, and for 20 years he has taught at his alma mater, the Yale School of Architecture, where he has won awards from his students for his teaching excellence. George is a part of the Reed Hildebrand team that is helping Darien plan for the future of Great Island. I've been working closely with George and his team on the Reed Hildebrand engagement, and we've spent a lot of time together in the last year. He's attended almost every meeting that we've had between Reed Hildebrand and the Great Island Advisory Committee since the project started. It didn't take long for me to figure out what makes George so successful. He has an innate need to know more about the project he is working on. We've taken walks on Great Island, toured the attics and basements of all the buildings, and we even took a boat ride together around the island so he could see the features from the water. George led residents on tours of the buildings on the island to explain why they are arranged in certain locations and what changes took place over time. None of this personal involvement was required by our contract with Reed Hildebrand, but it helps explain the viewpoint of the person you are about to hear tell us things that we didn't know about Great Island. He digs in to gain an understanding of place. His involvement in our Great Island will make the island even more wonderful. So please welcome George Knight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Lovely introduction and all the hospitality you've shown me. I wanted to begin by saying that I grew up in the area, and surely I had heard of Great Island and had long been curious about it, but I also had heard of the Darien Public Library and what an extraordinary community center this is. And so in some ways it's no surprise to see so many of you here supporting this incredible place, the Darien Public Library, which I think is the envy of any community around. So to the Darien Public Library, it's wonderful to actually be here. So I wanted to say a couple things to start with, and maybe firstly, by show of hands, I'm wondering how many people have actually been on Great Island, and I'm wondering if it might be 100%, it's close to 100%. And of that group, how many have actually been on any of the building tours or might have known it, earlier while it was still part of the Steinkraus family? Okay, still a good number. One of the things I would say at the outset, which has been true all along, is that we've learned a lot about the island, the history of the buildings, et cetera, and much of it has come from firsthand experience, people who have known it and lived it. And so I'm always so appreciative to hear the stories and the anecdotal history, which has enlarged so much the picture of this really extraordinary place. So please, that's an invitation to anyone to fill in or to dispute anything that I say. Nothing is intentionally incorrect. I think another thing to note is that I cannot claim to be an architectural historian. I teach architecture, design and drawing, but I am not an architectural historian by training. I have a deep interest in architectural history, and in my practice, I seek to design buildings, often working with existing buildings, which are character-rich, enduring, and accommodating to the service, to the functions that they carry forward. But I really don't claim to be an architectural historian per se. I have had the great pleasure, as Monica noted, of being one of the sub-consultants to Reed Hildebrand, a landscape architecture team in New Haven and Boston, with whom we've worked a number of times, to help think about and devise futures for this magnificent set of buildings on Great Island. Of these buildings that are shown here, I can say that we have learned a lot, and there's a good bit that is known, but at the same time, there's a whole lot that is not known, by which I mean there are incomplete, let's say, archives of information associating different important architects and less well-known architects to the different buildings. There is a fair bit of speculation that we've, and I'll share some of that, that we have put forth to try to connect some of the dots, and I think we feel fairly confident about some of the speculation we've made, and then other parts not so much. We're really talking about a fairly, well, a compact, but not the entirety of this Ziegler enterprise of the early 20th century. So there's a lot that we don't know about the larger extents. We know something about the landscape priorities, but as anyone who's been on that island recognizes immediately that the landscape design, just as much as the architecture, is one of the things that makes it so special. So really this is all a way to say that we will need to accept still that we're basing a lot of what we understand about the island on imperfect information. And so again, we're hoping, I think of this as really as a work in progress, a dress rehearsal to present to you all who know this place so well, to help build and fortify an idea about the history of Great Island. So to do what we need to do in the time that we have, we're going to leap over the fascinating geological history of Long Island Sound and what is described as the glacial lake of Connecticut. Who knew there was a glacial lake of Connecticut that was really the primitive Long Island Sound not too long ago, 20,000 years ago, so a second ago in geological time. Truly, really recent, and it was that geological lake that gave such character to places like, particularly the north shore of Long Island, and I think of Great Island as being maybe one of the most magnificent of that set of spaces. We are going to leap over the still understudied Siwanoy Indians, the Algonquin-speaking Native American tribe that subtribe of the Wappinger tribe, who lived surely in Long Neck and in Darien as seasonal encampments for millennia. We are going to leap over the very important pre-colonial, the colonial and revolutionary history of Darien as it transformed from Middlesex Parish to a subset of administrative subset of Stamford to its own independent town, Darien. And we will, again, here's the revolutionary history that's so beautifully portrayed in your town hall, the murals in the town hall. We will not discuss that at all. What we will do is try to start at the dawn of the 20th century, really the Ziegler moment, as it were. Now, to set the context for that, I think I'll say I think it's somewhat difficult for us who are here to imagine what Darien might have been like in 1902 when William Ziegler Sr. acquires the property from the Selleck family, who had held it for centuries. This is an image of, and probably well familiar to you all, of Rings End, where there was a settlement, a grist mill, and a crossing. And this is actually a slightly earlier map and very blurry, but this is crucially important because this is the New York and New Haven railway line that was laid in 1848. And so in this map, we see the red arrow points to Great Island, showing it as largely undeveloped. What we don't see, of course, we do see Kings Highway, which has become the post road at this point, which will become Route 1, but not yet. We don't see the Merritt Parkway, of course, which won't appear for 100 years from this time this map is made. We won't see I-95, obviously, which is such a defining feature of contemporary life and the town of Darien. So I think it's actually important to hold this image in our mind as we think of what it would even mean for the Zieglers to come to Darien, along with a group of, Tokenique is being developed at this time. So there are a new wave of people who are populating Darien. Population currently is about 3,000 people at this time, who will transform it in the coming decades. Here is probably a familiar portrait of William Ziegler Sr., who's obviously an extraordinary figure, grows up outside of Pittsburgh, very modest means. He's interested in chemistry and goes on to found an extraordinarily successful baking powder company, along with a number of other food-related products. And by the time he's in his middle age, he's become fabulously wealthy. It's a really, very much a early 20th century, late 19th century story of extraordinary slingshot into sort of stratospheric wealth, that of which there are a number. It was he who bought the land, which prior to his purchase had been used. Daniel Edgar had acquired it from the Selig family, who had it for years. But my understanding of the land at that time was really kind of hardscrabble farming. A lot of shoreline activity, shell fishing, some modest industry, grazing for animals, and hardscrabble agriculture and such. This is all some of this is well documented in Linda Civitello's Baking Powder Wars, which I understand she has spoken here and has a fantastic knowledge about the industrial history of Ziegler. Ziegler dies in 1905, shortly after buying and beginning to develop the property. It is his son, William Ziegler II, who really becomes responsible for advancing the island and its buildings. This is a picture of Ziegler Jr. with his second wife, Helen, who lived really the longest on Great Island. They had two children, William Ziegler III and a daughter who's pictured on the left, Helen Ziegler Steinkraus, nicknamed Sis, and her husband William Steinkraus. The whole family, going back to Ziegler Sr., apparently was enormously interested in horses. And the Steinkrauses, I think, maybe more than anyone in the family, were really devoted to horses. She particularly dressage, and he jumping. And I came across this picture, which I had to show because I had read a lot about his interest in jumping, and even the fact that he had competed in 4 sequential Olympics from 52 to 72. But this picture tells me a lot. I don't know anything about horse jumping, but this tells me all I need to know about him and his prowess. One of the really valuable pieces of information that we have is a map that is dated 1931, and then it's revised in 1938. This is actually just half of it, but it includes an inventory of all the structures on the island. And it's this map that allows us to conclude that really virtually everything that is on the island today was there even in 1931, and it gives us some toehold in the chronology of the island itself, and they're all keyed into this beautifully drawn map and then enumerated in a table that's adjacent. You can see it in the lower left portion of the left side image. So I wonder if I were, show of hands again, how many people might know of Harry P. Knowles as an architect? Okay, that's your real architecture buffs here, if you do. He's not as well known as some of the other architects who are associated with this island, but indeed, we feel that he is the likely lead character in the architectural history of Great Island. he was maybe one of the reasons he's not as well known as he might be is that much of his work was for Masonic temples. So he was a very important builder of Masonic temples and did a number of them. This is a picture of what is called the Mecca Temple, which is now the New York City Center, a theater in New York on 55th Street, the west side. But built originally as a Masonic temple, then a Shriners temple, it seated 5,000 people, and with banquet halls below for another 5,000. So this is our architect in Darien here. Apparently, this had the largest piece of steel that was ever installed in New York City at the time, 1923, the same year that he died. So it was actually many years before that, as Knowles' career was just starting, that he was engaged by another prominent Mason, William Ziegler Sr., to start to build some of the first buildings on Great Island. Now, one of the gaps that we have is that the only building that we can say for sure was designed by Knowles is the stable. That's 1913. But we know that the house existed well before then, and the stylistic similarity of the buildings that we're seeing on this slide, so the manor house on the upper left, the carriage house on the upper right, what is called the lodge or the gatehouse on the lower left, the boathouse, lower middle, and then of course the fabulous stable. They all have a lot of material and formal similarity that allow us, or that tempts us at least, to speculate that they are all the work of Harry Knowles. One thing that I would draw your eyes to is this rusticated column that appears in several of these buildings, again, which we think is a line through the various buildings. Here is a drawing, a painting that was, the image was loaned to us by Ned Steinkraus, that actually is signed by Knowles and dated by Knowles. So this is indeed the stable as built and gives us that assurance. We have other drawings that, again, assure us that Knowles was the architect of this. So upon this, we base our speculation that, in fact, Knowles is the primary architect for much of that original masonry architecture on the island, and including the manor house, the main house. Of course, many of you may know that this is not the original stable that was first appeared on the island under the creation of William Ziegler Sr. This is pictured here. It's amazing that we do have the photograph of it. This is taken in 1910. This building burns in 1912. And we don't really know where the site was. We wonder if it's not the very same site that the current stables are on, but I don't think we actually know that. And this is the only evidence that I'm aware of of that original building. The event must have been so catastrophic, surely it was, that it caused Ziegler Jr. now, who was taken over the island, William Ziegler Jr., to think hard about what would be next for his horses, because he really wanted to advance his horse program, and that's the source of this magnificent stable building that you all know so well, that is built, we believe, of stone that comes from on or nearby the island, built magnificently stoutly, fantastic stone carving, beautiful slate roofs, fantastic copper work, etc. Terrific doors of all sorts of descriptions, terrific light fixtures. Everything about this building is exquisite. You all know it from various angles, and many of you know it from the interior. In fact, it's the interior that I think many of us think is the most remarkable and memorable feature of the building. This is a drawing that is probably not even legible, but I wanted to put it up because this again gives us evidence that you can barely see it. J.F. Knowles, architect, H. Knowles, architect. This is a drawing that was produced not by the architects of the building, but by a subcontractor of the building, the Guastavino Fireproof Building Company. And some of you may know this company. I put this slide up. you're all library people, obviously, and I wonder if you might know this building, the Boston Public Library, I'm sure you do, which was designed by Charles Follam McKim of McKim, Mead and White in the late 1800s, 1898. And among other fantastic features is this beautiful Guastavino vaulting that you're seeing here. So this is Raphael Guastavino himself, who is a fascinating character, a Catalan emigre, who came to America. I think he first worked, we believe, for the Vanderbilt family, the construction work that was going on at the Biltmore in North Carolina. He actually ended up having a house in North Carolina from that experience. But he set up his business, the Guastavino Fireproof Building Company, in the Boston area. And this is not the first, but a very, very prominent commission that he won. And he's sitting, very proudly standing atop this very thin arch, improbably supporting him and what could be thousands of pounds more than that. And these are some more construction photos of that library being built in the late 1800s. So you're seeing the workers laying out these very thin shell vaults using tile, not really brick. It's very thin, about an inch thick, not stone. Thin tiles that are laid together to create these extremely strong vaults that produce spaces like this. And there are several such rooms in the BPL. Some of them are this raw exposed tile that we see here. Others are adorned with plaster and decorative elements, but they're all beautiful in their own right. And I wonder if it's worth pausing just for a second to talk about how the idea of arching and vaults is so fascinating. Back to Ziegler, he had his stable burned down. I can only imagine how horrific that was. I don't know if he lost horses. I don't know if people died, but it was absolutely horrific. He was determined to build a fireproof stable. And so that means no timber spanning. You have to span in some other material, some unburnable material. So Knowles selected Guastavino to provide that span. Here we see what's often called a Roman arch or a voussoir arch, compressive arch. In fact, here's the stable door with that very type of an arch that we're all familiar with. There are these impost blocks from which the arch springs. There are these trapezoidal blocks that are laid up around that arch called voussoir that support a keystone in the center, and the gravity all loads together and keeps that in place. Relies on a lot of lateral mass because there's a lot of thrust that wants to blow that arch apart. But it's very, very durable, very strong, but very difficult to build. You have to build a whole interior structure in order to lay all of those stones, because only when you put that final keystone in will it stand, then you can remove that formwork, or centering it's called. Whereas here, the Guastavino arch that we see here on the interior is dramatically lighter. It can take a very modest rise, so it's not going to consume a lot of the second floor, whereas the Roman arch does require quite a lot of lift in order to make that fantastic physical property work. You can see this is made of cubic stone that has to be cut specially, each one, whereas the Guastavino is a systematic tile that can be mass-produced and laid up, and it's really the adhesion of 2 or 3 layers with a plaster type mortar that allows it to take these forms and hold them and produce a really fantastically strong stout structure. So this was the natural choice for Knowles, and created really a beautiful interior that I think is a signature of Great Island, and one of the features that I think everyone that I've walked into that stable, myself included, just adores about that building. It's not rare, I'll tell you that, and I think we can all be happy about that. The Guastavino Company produced more than 1,000 buildings in America, and I'll show you just some of the ones, but there are many in Connecticut, there are many, many, many all over the country. I find it particularly interesting that this is Ellis Island. maybe one of the first rooms that many new Americans ever saw was a Guastavino room. It has often been quipped that it was the same architect as Grand Central Station that designed the stable. That's not quite true. Warren Wetmore were the architects of Grand Central Station. They, like Knowles, engaged the Guastavino Fireproof Building Company to provide floors and ceiling systems in some of the areas of that building, but they're very memorable, and those of you who know the Oyster Bar or the areas around it know and appreciate a slide like this. The almost endless geometric possibilities with this material. So this is a stair from 1914 at Carnegie Mellon University. To me, it looks dazzlingly modern and original, all created by using this process of vaulting with this thin tile. Or an earlier project at City Hall subway station in New York City, where it's taken to a whole decorative height. Some of you may know the Queensboro Bridge, which at one point was converted to Conrad's and then has been a supermarket, other things. It features a voluminous space that's entirely Guastavino. And then some other projects. It happened that there was an art academy in a consolidated art academy in Havana, Cuba that had begun and I think is now in ruin. But there's lots of perennially there's an effort to kind of rehabilitate this academy that's all built out of Guastavino tiles, built in the 1960s. But of course, here is our beloved Guastavino tile at Great Island. And I should say that this idea for creating a fireproof stable, I don't think it's entirely original. We can't say that Knowles is entirely original in this regard, but this was a project that was a successor project, which happens to be the Equestrian Center, the U.S. Equestrian Training Center in New Jersey, that was built as a private barn and horse facility, and was well known to the Zieglers and the Steinkrauses, actually, who spent a good bit of time there, and who we first heard about from the Steinkraus family. So one of the most enigmatic buildings on Great Island, for sure, is the Manor House. And here's an undated picture, but it must be early, that we think the Manor House, property's bought in 1902, we think the Manor House comes out in 1903, 1904, somewhere around then. Here it is. Here we're seeing that rusticated column, that bulging column that we had seen at the lodge, that we've seen at the stable. Here is in fact the carriage that's right in front of it. This is the land side of that building, and here's another picture, land side of the Manor House. And again, I think it's most of the people in the audience know this building. But one of the things that is interesting is the discrepancy between what we see today and what it was in the early 1900s. So, for instance, it's not a perfect pairing, but this surface is in fact this surface. So this porch is no longer standing. Nor is a similar porch on the water side. Another thing that's really interesting is that the whole third floor is gone. So it's not simply that it's a barrel tile roof, but in fact the third floor and its dormers are gone. I don't know the rationale behind that, how that came to be. We've told ourselves that there might have been a fire. All sorts of things seem possible. When you go up into the attic of this building, you actually can detect easily that there's a very shallow rise and pitch of the floor of the attic. So you're under the rafters on a surface that's not level, which we actually realize was a temporary roof shedding water, presumably while they built the roof that we see here, with its quite featured bracketed eaves here. The stonework, for instance, that you see here is not the same as the stonework you see on the balance of the house. Chimneys are different. There's now a rather high wall that runs in front here. So there's a good number of changes that are evident just in this pairing. And as we look at the backside, the water side of the house, we see a lot of that similar original material that's no longer there. This whole colonnade with these very featured columns, the gables, the three-story tower-like element here, the whole third floor with its presumably a servant's accommodations on the third floor, but we don't know. Of course, that is not what it looks like today. Here we have not simply the omission now of the third floor, the transformation of a slate roof to a Spanish barrel-style clay roof, but a whole new mass that's been added to this side, a colonnade that has been totally removed and replaced with a masonry arcade that comes in 2 generations, a octagonal breakfast room that's been added here. So it's a real transformation. We don't know. We speculate that Knowles is the original architecture. We think maybe Knowles did some renovation on the building itself. Knowing that this was largely a summer residence, you could imagine work campaigns happening while the rest of the months go by. But we speculate about fire. We speculate a lot of stuff. But one of the things that's more readily accessible to us is some other architects who, again, we think, we have lots of circumstantial evidence to suggest that other architects, and maybe more prominent than Knowles, were involved in some way in the creation of this house. And the first of these is Addison Meisner, who I think I've been reading about him recently. He's one of the most interesting characters in American life. He is from California. His father is a sort of administrative diplomat and brings young Addison Meisner to his posting in Guatemala as a teenager. So he's there for a number of years. He speaks Spanish fluently. He travels in Mexico, other parts of Central America. He travels more broadly. He visits China even. He and his brother go to the Canadian Yukon in search of gold. And like so many others, they find that that's not a great idea. He goes to no architectural school. He has no architectural training. He's very artistic and very enterprising. And so he finds himself in Florida and Palm Beach at this time. Teens, early 20s is exploding with a whole new population that's coming there for the winter. And he realizes that this is an important population and creates a whole world for himself and his clients in Florida. Most notably, Paris Singer of the Singer Sewing Machine. He's an heir to the Singer Sewing Machine family. He becomes a business partner and a dear friend. Meisner sets up not just an architectural practice, but an industrial works for decorative arts, creating tiles and decorative mantelpieces, ironwork, all sorts of accoutrements that go into these beautiful Spanish Gothic melange type constructions. So you may know the Everglades Club in Palm Beach. This is original photos from that, which was actually built, I believe, as Singer's home and then turned into a club. Singer ended up living there, I think, for much of his life, later life, or the private commissions such as these two in Palm Beach, and then in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania on the right. So not what you would expect, or I would expect in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania on the right. Maybe as you might not expect this style to proliferate in a place like Darien, the Northeast. But in fact, we have evidence. To me, it's imperfect evidence that Meisner was brought here by Ziegler to work on his home, and I'll show you pictures of that, as well as Weyburn, where Ziegler was a founding member. And again, I say not perfect because I have not seen, but maybe others have seen actual documentation of that. There are inventories of Meisner's work that are imperfect, but that don't include, for instance, Webern. But yet there's a lot that I have read that suggests that he has designed Webern. There's a lot that I speculate that Meisner was involved in the Manor House. This is another one of Meisner's projects, the Villa Meisner in Palm Beach. Features this beautiful great hall. Meisner kind of met his end in business terms by a big speculation that he made with Singer for Boca Raton. And this was some of the promotional material that was presented for that. And I think you can get a sense of his character from this very confident statement that he's making, which is really wonderful. And I think it was shortly thereafter that it really ended Meisner's career. But notably, he is all the accounts of him, and I think it's worth saying, are really laudatory. And he sounds like not simply an artistic genius, but he was an energized person. Some people say he was actually living an uncloseted life, which would make him an early uncloseted figure in American life, which is particularly interesting. He was beloved by his employees, apparently, according to written accounts, who were, again, designers, builders, craftspeople producing all of the work that went into the houses. And here he is at Great Island, we believe. This is an addition to the main house called the Juliet Cottage. I'm not sure where that name comes from. It might have been a Ziegler name or something that came later, or Steinkraus name. But this was, we feel rather certain, built in the early 20s. We have an account of the Zieglers, and this would be William Jr. and his first wife Gladys. The New York Tribune calls them newcomers to Palm Beach. So they were part of this early wave, 1921, arriving in Palm Beach and experiencing that splendor that people like Meisner were creating. And one speculates that they were so enchanted by him and that life that they brought him up to Darien to build this addition, which I think as beautiful as this is certainly incongruous with any version of the manor house that we have seen thus far. So this is an addition to it. And here's a comparison between that earlier picture we had seen of the Great Hall, Villa Meisner, and the interior on the right side of the manor house at Great Island. The comparisons go on. So on the left is the Meisner's Villa Marisol, El Marisol, and on right is the Great Island building. So again, we don't have a drawing. I can't say there's an archival drawing that I can actually point to that confirms that it was in fact Meisner who was working at Great Island. But there's a lot of evidence, and even some of the interior materials. There's some tile work, etc., in the interiors of the octagonal breakfast room that again smack of Meisner's hand. Another, and maybe even more prominent architect who is associated with absolutely the Ziegler family, and we feel strongly Great Island, is William Lawrence Bottomley. Bottomley is born in the late 1880s. He lives between New York and Virginia. He's educated at Columbia School of Architecture, very prestigious path to the École des Beaux-Arts, which is the great architecture school in Paris that he graduates from, and spends time in Rome after that, returns to New York where he establishes a very successful practice and works throughout the 20s and 30s doing primarily residential projects, single-family homes, but notably a number of multi-family and larger projects in New York. This is the River House and River Club on the east side, which the FDR Drive has changed this view dramatically, but it originally featured a riverfront dockage and some exquisite detailing. This is more similar to the bulk of his practice, which was private residential work that was done in a very elegant mid-Atlantic neo-colonial style. This happens to be a house built in 1927 for the Zieglers, for William Ziegler Jr. and his wife Helen, this is the house in Virginia. that they have. Not to be confused with a house that Bottomley designs in the same year for them in New York City. So this is on 55th Street and was a lauded private residence, absolutely beautiful, still there. I think now owned by SUNY, and I don't know if the interiors are still intact, but the original pictures of them are absolutely exquisite and very much in keeping with Bottomley's hand, which was to say the exterior architecture flows perfectly with the interior architecture, with the decor, with the landscape. It's all one thing. So there are beautiful gardens in the back of this building, terraces, etc. And again, more examples of Bottomley's work. This happens to be a trio of buildings that are designed in the Richmond area and are very, very characteristic of Bottomley's style and character. Here we are. This is the Manor House at Great Island. And again, I don't think anyone would associate this interior with the pictures that we saw, the original pictures, the Knowles, let's say, the Harry Knowles design of that heavy rusticated stone, the deep arches. Here we have surely a kind of neo-colonial room, Virginian, I would say. We're not sure if this is all original material. It may be spolia or spoils, fragments taken from other maybe demolished 18th and early 19th century houses, but set up in a beautifully elegant way and in a rather complete interior. That continues on in various other parts of the house. The image on the right is a particularly interesting one because this is the doorway that has been transformed to a third floor that is no longer there. It's now an attic, and Bottomley is brought into, and it brings with him this kind of colonial architecture, which is fascinating. Here we have on the left, not so impressive, but a kind of very much a Bottomley touch, this trio of arches in a bathroom. This happens repeatedly in Bottomley's work. Here we're seeing a renovation on the left side of that Meisner, we believe the Meisner designed Juliet house that again had the Spanish colonial exterior, and now Meisner has touched it with his neo-colonial interior. But on the right is the bathroom from the New York City house that Bottomley designs for the Zieglers. Similarly, here we see a pairing on the left side, Great Island's dining hall. On the right, the Ziegler house in New York City by Bottomley. So I guess I'm trying to make, I don't have direct evidence that this is Bottomley's work, but I'm trying to persuade myself and maybe you that Bottomley is working at Great Island. Another building that I'm dying to confirm was designed by Bottomley, but I can't do it yet, is what was described as the Playhouse, sometimes called the Pink House, which is a freestanding building that was built for the Ziegler kids to play in. It was a kind of nanny's cottage and a play and schoolhouse for them that has this very elegant, original touch using this beautiful kind of colonial vernacular, but it's one time very original and has these spectacular views straight through out to the Sound, filled with this lovely Bottomley detailing. And one of the fun things that happened as we were doing several of our crawls through attics and tunnels and all sorts of things was to come upon this little fragmentary drawing that unto itself is not very important, but what it contained was this we found in the basement of the Manor House. You see in the lower corner, you can just make out William Lawrence Bottomley, undated, but we know this is the drawing of that trio of arches in the renovated Juliet house. So we have a toehold. We have a toehold of which we're trying to develop more to situate Bottomley in the larger history of not just the Ziegler family, which we know he's done two major projects for them, but of Great Island itself. So all of this is to say it's been an enormously exciting process for us as architects to follow the traces of people that we really admire and others that we had learned about at Great Island, and to think about how we can build upon the shoulders of those great architects. So with that, I will stop talking. I think we have time for questions. I was told that the library intends this to be not go too long, so I was asked to keep the questions really to the historical content. There was a big meeting on Saturday about the future of Great Island, which is very important. But if you all can focus your questions on any of the history, I will try to answer. And I would welcome if others know histories that I haven't mentioned or can fill in. I would really appreciate that. So with that, I will stop talking. Have I found any cornerstones that contained any secluded or secret information? Alas, no. I'm looking for them. If anyone knows, please point them to you. You don't, okay. Yeah, I haven't, they're not marked buildings, they're private buildings, so they don't tell us much in that way, so. Yeah, great question. What is the condition of the buildings? And yeah, so I'll say that they are really well built. Particularly this grouping of masonry buildings. There are some wooden buildings, which we didn't talk about, that are in different shape, but the masonry buildings are really well built. In most cases, really, they have not been tended to in a long time, decades. And so there's a lot that needs to happen, predictably. Anyone who has a house would know, like, there are all sorts of improvements that need to be made, maintenance and such. But the good news is that they're so well built that they have lasted a long period of deferred maintenance. So I think we'd be happy about that. Yes, surely that's the case. Yeah. So Bottomley works in a range. He does a lot of different styles, but his sweet spot surely is a kind of Anglo colonial Neo-Georgian range that that he uses very deftly, and it also spans sort of a mid-Atlantic colonial, high-style colonial, to even a more modest New England colonial. And I think we can see that in his work, and surely when he's operating at Great Island in that dining room, I think is the most vivid exhibition of this. Is, there he's really, it's almost the English Baroque in terms of its flamboyance and level of decoration. It is all wood, it's painted wood, so again, I think it's sort of high-styled Virginian colonial architecture that he's bringing to, and it may be that some of that material is originally from that place and that period. I don't know. I haven't quite been able to tell. But I think it's a great distinction. It's not New England, frugal Yankee architecture. Absolutely not. Even if we wanted to pretend it was such, that would be a misleading conclusion. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, it's amazing because the house must have been almost like continuously under construction from its inception in 1903-4 until we think 25, maybe something like that, with several major waves where a whole third floor is cleared off, and then lots of secondary interior alterations and improvements. So it's really, things seem to settle down, let's say, we think, in about 1925 at the main house. So it's 20 years of a fairly serious activity. No, it's exactly, yeah, it's a great question. You would think even in that time, we have scoured the Knowles's work is held sort of his archive is held sort of with the American Freemason group. They have some written material on other projects, nothing on this. We have looked at, there are two separate Meisner archives. There's nothing on Great Island. Bottomley's archives, there's some of his work is at Avery Library at Columbia, and there's quite a lot on Ziegler, his work with the Zieglers, but not at Great Island. So it's not that it doesn't exist. I'm 100% certain that it does exist. I just don't know how to get our hands on it. Yeah, that's a big gap for us right now. We have very little accounts of the construction process, which surely exists. I mean, it was such a big undertaking. I can't imagine anything of this scale happened in Darien I mean, literally anything of this scale happened in Darien, and so we have not been able to track that down. We've tried local sources. The library's been very helpful. The town historian's been very helpful. And again, it's not that it doesn't exist, but that's why I want you please to believe me that this is a work in progress. So we're making progress. We have a long way to go. If people know, I mean, I have a feeling that the Ziegler-Steinkraus family may have somewhere information. I feel surely they do, and Ned Steinkraus has been wonderful and gave us quite a lot of time and sent us some of the material that I showed today. But I feel that there are troves of information that just are existing in some warehouse that we haven't yet been able to put our hands on. Well, I hope not. I hope not. Yeah. So that's something that we know was designed. You know, it was absolutely designed, and there too, it's another major gap. We don't have that information. This is the history of the landscape design. We don't have that information. We think that all the way back to the William Ziegler Sr. and his wife Matilda, we understand that they were very interested in the ecology of the island and such, and that was carried through subsequent generations. But we don't have yet written material on that. I mean, it's a very skilled workforce that is working here on every trade, you know, so it's a huge amount of labor. I mean, we can say for sure that this great island is a treasury, right, of you know, artistic resources, but also a testament to phenomenal amounts of labor and ingenuity and care in the original construction and carried all the way through, you know, until yesterday. So it's an extraordinary thing. The embodied energy that exists on this island is astronomical, and I think that's one of the great, you know, inheritances that you as a town can be proud of and take so seriously. Yes, surely. Yeah, surely. In some ways, this is maybe a rough draft of that. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. Is there any other Guastavino work on the island? Not that I have found, and I wouldn't actually expect that there would be, only because the priority for the stable to be fireproof, you know, took it to this higher level. It's much more expensive construction, and so whereas the greenhouse was more straightforward, there's small rooms. I don't think that it required that large span. But it's a great question, and if we found some, we would absolutely cherish it. The manor house, as I understand it, has been, with certain short-term exceptions, essentially empty since the death of Helen Steinkraus. So it's about 50 years, I believe. I think it's basically been empty for 50. There have been some occupancy, but yeah, I haven't visited those buildings. We've seen some historical records, these site plans and these inventories, et cetera. There's a film that we've seen, but I have not been inside them to say. Yes, not about this project, but he's written the definitive book. We can be very grateful that there's such a terrific book, because prior to his recent, I think it's in 10 years, no longer than 10 years, we had very disaggregated information about this incredible company and this incredible 1,000 buildings in America, all extraordinary. We didn't know much about. So that is the source that we all use for anything Guastavino. It's called Guastavino Vaulting by John Oschendorf, who is an MIT professor. He builds these with his students at MIT, sometimes small but sometimes fabulously complicated, and it's really an interesting. I mean, they say there's never been a failure of these buildings, you know, which just says a lot. You know, even to structural engineers who wouldn't, you know, they're generally very conservative folks and quantitative, but the fact that there has never been a failure, I think, says a lot for the strength of material. They have just a little bit of centering to start the primary arches, and then it's all built with this adhesive mortar and light, because it's the material itself, the tile is so light that the mortar can set up rather quickly. Quick setting, yeah. I think it's very, very, you know, obviously skilled labor is doing this, but once you get going, I think you can go very quickly. I see so many familiar faces, and many of these faces have taught me a great deal about this very special place, so thank you all.